I guess we have Kevin Chu from one of our federal agencies to talk about their side of the story.
Some federal agency,
yeah,
or other. Yeah.
Well, I never know. Yeah. You the ops. Go right ahead.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners. My name is Kevin Chu. I'm from the National Marine Fisheries Service, SONCI, and it's a pleasure to be here. And the purpose I have today is just to sort of step fairly quickly through the responsibilities, the legal authorities that the National Marine Fisheries Service has for permitting and evaluating the Diablo Canyon seismic surveys. There are 5 different authorities that we are operating under. They are the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and as the people have pointed out, the marine mammal stuff falls to us. Marine mammals are us, I think. The Endangered Species Act, the Magnuson-Stevens Fisheries Conservation and Management Act, the NEPA, and the Marine Sanctuaries Act. I apologize for the busyness of this slide. There are going to be several like this. They were very carefully edited by very dedicated staff members who wanted to make sure that they were all factual and complete, and nobody cared whether they were actually readable. So I'll sort of try to read some of them to you. I want to start with discussing the Marine Mammal Protection Act. The Marine Mammal Protection Act actually requires the National Marine Fisheries Service to issue what they call an incidental harassment authorization under certain circumstances. So we have to, the wording is up there, the Secretary shall allow the incidental but not intentional take of small numbers of marine mammals. There are conditions, however, on that. We have to find a number of things in order to issue that incidental harassment authorization, and if we fail to find each one of those, then we cannot issue that authorization, and the take therefore is illegal. The main one being there should be a negligible impact on the species or the stock. Okay, so we have to determine that these seismic surveys would have a negligible impact. I will say this authority also allows us to set forth some mitigating procedures. Okay. One of the requirements of issuing an incidental harassment authorization is that we seek public comment. We have issued a proposed finding. We published that in the Federal Register on Wednesday, the 19th, and we are seeking public comment for a month. The comment period ends on October 15th. And buried in there, if you brought your binoculars to the meeting, you would be able to read this. I'd like to actually read the third bullet because people may want to write this down. You will be able to find the proposed incidental harassment at www.nmfs.noaa.gov/permits/incidental.htm PG&E 2012. And again, we are seeking comments for until October 15th. I'd like to just step briefly through some of what I think are the key proposed conclusions in that proposed IHA. First, that there will be no injury or mortality expected of any marine mammal, and none is authorized, so no injury or mortality. However, we are expecting that there will be harassment, but we do believe that it will have a negligible impact because of the various mitigation measures that the PG&E have proposed to take. And we are relatively assured by the very extensive monitoring program. I think we're going to actually learn an awful lot about the responses of marine mammals to sounds based on the scientific studies that are going to take place as part of this survey. And I will say that we have paid special attention and were particularly concerned about the impacts of the survey to a resident population of harbor porpoise that are found pretty much only in the Morro Bay area. We definitely have considered the impact to that very narrowly constrained population. The second law that we are responsive to is the Endangered Species Act. Of course, some marine mammals are endangered. Some endangered species are marine mammals, but they don't overlap exactly. There is a particular authority that we will be engaged in, and that is that if any federal agency thinks that its action could jeopardize the existence of an endangered or threatened species, it is required to consult with us. And the National Marine Fisheries Service issues what's called a biological opinion as to the impacts of that survey. We have not issued the biological opinion yet, and we will not put out a draft. We, however, are paying close attention to the public comments that we get on the incidental harassment authorization. We are working very closely with PG&E. We are consulting as widely as we can, but I'm sorry to say there will not be an opportunity for public comment on the biological opinion per se. I guess I got it just a little ahead of myself. I should point out that the biological opinions allow us to authorize an exemption for the take of endangered or threatened species, and it also allows us to require a prudent and reasonable, what we call reasonable and prudent measures to mitigate the impacts. Okay, and we will be including those in the biological opinion that we put out. For this particular action, there are actually two federal actions that we have to consult upon. One is the National Science Foundation's survey. They own the research vessel, and therefore it's a federal activity, and therefore they have to ask us whether it's okay, and we consult with them and issue a biological opinion. It sounds a little odd, but we also have to consult with ourselves about whether we should issue an incidental harassment authorization under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And it gets even more complicated because we have to do a NEPA analysis on all these things as well. But we will be issuing a single biological opinion that incorporates both of these things when it comes out. Okay. So I can't tell you what the biological opinion will say, but I can assure you that these are the endangered or threatened species that we have identified, and we will be considering the impacts of the surveys to each of these things. Of the whales, there are blue whales, fin whales, sei whales, humpbacks, and sperm whales. Gray whales are not considered endangered anymore. They were delisted about 12 years ago, I think. There are some pinnipeds, the Guadalupe fur seal and the Steller sea lion. There are a number of sea turtles, green leatherback, loggerhead, olive ridley turtles. There are a series of fish species listed under the ESA, Chinook and coho salmon, both found in the area. Green sturgeon are found in the area, and steelhead are also there. And finally, there is one invertebrate that we'll be considering, black abalone. The third legal responsibility we have is under the Magnuson-Stevens Fisheries Conservation and Fisheries Conservation and Management Act, better known as the MSA. That's a lot easier to say. It actually does not give us much authority in this field. Any federal agency is required to consult with us about the impacts on essential fish habitat, but beyond that consultation, the MSA really focuses on managing commercial fishing, not on seismic surveys. However, we will be reviewing the surveys as to whether they affect the what we call essential fish habitat. I would venture to guess that we'll find that it does not have a long-term effect, but we are concerned about the immediate impact of the loud sounds on fish. And I'll just point out that the fish species that we ourselves are particularly responsible for are these commercially managed ones, the highly migratory species like the tunas and swordfish, the coastal pelagic species like sardines and mackerel, and then groundfish and salmon. The fourth element that we need to address is the National Environmental Policy Act. This does not actually require us to issue permits, but it is a process by which the federal government reviews its actions and evaluates whether the action is in the best interests of the present and future generations of Americans. It also helps to document to the public how we made our decisions and what we considered. So both the National Science Foundation will issue its NEPA analysis for its surveys, and we will issue our NEPA analysis for the issuance of an incidental harassment authorization. Probably the Fisheries Service will not issue an extensive environmental assessment. It will sort of piggyback on the more complete, more complex action that the National Science Foundation will do. Yeah. So I do want to go a little bit slowly through some of the findings that the National Marine Fisheries Service made on an earlier, the draft National Science Foundation EA in I believe it was late June, possibly July. They issued an environmental assessment of the impacts of the seismic surveys. This is before the surveys were curtailed, for modifications like eliminating Section 3 and splitting it into 2 years and confining the survey period to November and December. So on that expanded proposal, the National Marine Fisheries Service did comment on their draft EA, and we did concur that the information was valuable. I want to raise that flag because I know it's something that people are concerned about. We are not the agency who would determine whether the information was necessary, but or whether other forms of gathering the information would be preferable. We're not the agency that understands how rocks work and faults, but we did concur that it would be useful to have this information. However, on the original EA, we asked for a more thorough analysis of the impacts to commercial fish and to commercial and recreational fishing as well. We asked for more information on marine mammals because we thought that the original one needed a fair amount more information on that. And we particularly asked for more information about the impacts of sound on fish. In addition, we asked that they provide more information on the impacts of resources in the National Marine Sanctuary, and this was at the time when Section 3 was included, and it was not in the National Marine Sanctuary, the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, but it was close to it, and it was unclear whether the National Marine Sanctuary's resources would be affected. So this brings me to our last authority that we act under, and this is not actually a National Marine Fisheries Service responsibility. It's a National Marine Sanctuaries program. They're in a different line offices, but I should say last but not least, as I'm sure they would want me to say it's not least, we have the National Marine Sanctuaries Act. And that requires that federal agencies consult with the National Marine Sanctuary Program if there is any project that is likely to destroy, cause the loss of, or injure any sanctuary resource. We are unsure whether we're still unsure whether the changes made will affect the sanctuary resources, and we will ask for more information on that. So just in conclusion, we have asked for further information as to whether the surveys could still affect the resources in the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Thank you. That's the extent of my presentation.
Mr. Shadden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Dr. Chu, and thanks for coming and sharing the perspective of the Fisheries Service with us. I can't remember from my work with the Fisheries Service an incidental harassment permit. How does that differ from an incidental take permit? I mean, is it just a type of incidental take permit, or are the standards and are the permit conditions different under the Marine Mammal Act?
Well, I'd like to give you a really authoritative answer to that, but I can't. I really don't know, Mike, and I'm sorry about that.
I'm assuming, since harassment is part of the definition of take under the Marine Mammal Act, I'm assuming that this is a lesser permit that doesn't involve lethal take, right? That harassment implies that you're not killing the animal.
Yeah, that is correct. And we are assuming that in these seismic surveys there will be no injury or death to the animals, only harassment.
Okay. There does seem to be an abundant evidence from the Navy sonar experiments that marine mammals, particularly cetaceans, can be pretty significantly injured by high-powered sonar. So I wonder if we're talking about the right permit here. If there is a potential for injury of marine mammals, not so much sea otters, but really the cetaceans, the whales and dolphins from this, I wonder if harassment is really what we're talking about, or something more.
Well, I think the modifications that the PG&E are proposing, this gradual ramp up, and the observer coverage, and the provisions to stop immediately when the marine mammals are located within a certain area, all of those are factors that we have weighed to make us feel that there will be no injury or death. This is, I will say, this is something that somebody could comment on.
Right. The other thing I know people are going to have questions about is the distance, since you brought up observers, the distance at which marine mammals could be detected. If there are observers on the vessel, they're obviously going to see marine mammals that are close to the vessel, but what about marine mammals that are a mile away or even a half a mile away? That, as you know from your own experience, it's sometimes difficult to see marine mammals, or for the observers to detect them at greater distances. I know that's been an issue before with some of the observers on sonar vessels. I worry that the observers that you're going to deploy are not going to be able to tell or detect all of the marine mammals in the vicinity that might be affected.
Yeah, and I have not studied the proposal for monitoring. However, my impression is that there will be observers on there is going to be other vessels engaged as well.
Okay, Sonkin, let's move forward.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other federal agencies wishing to present before we move on to PG&E? Yes? Come on up. Are you Jana Alfonso? Oh, thank you. She's with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Thank you very much. I understand you had a few. Your part to tell.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. I apologize, I don't have any visuals prepared. I just heard about this hearing on Friday, in fact, of last week. So, but I think Mr. Chu and our partners with Department of Fish and Game gave a very
Could you
good
identify
overview.
yourself real quickly for the record? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Jana Alfonso with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Deputy Division Chief. of the Endangered Species Program with the Pacific Southwest Regional Office here in Sacramento. So I have a brief overview of where we're at with our permitting and consultation process. We have a proposed incidental harassment authorization of southern sea otters. It's scheduled to be published in the Federal Register this Wednesday, September 26th. As you just heard from Mr. Chu, theirs is already out for public comment. Our public comment period begins on Wednesday with publication. However, the document is up for public inspection on the Federal Register website as of this morning. I checked it before I came here, so it's up. But again, the official public comment period begins this Wednesday. So this notice is necessary to request public comment on our proposed issuance of an IHA under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. It includes our findings that this authorization will have a negligible impact on the species from harassment associated with seismic testing off the coast of Central California, and that the authorization will affect no more than small numbers of southern sea otters. We find that 352 southern sea otters, or this is about approximately 13% of the estimated total population size, are estimated to be potentially taken by exposure to sound associated with testing, and that this type of harassment is not likely to result in adverse effects through effects on annual rates of recruitment or survival because of limited exposure. Related to the, I'm not going to get too much into the monitoring study because I think Fish and Game did a presentation, so I'm just going to briefly describe how it's considered in the Federal Register notice. PG&E has agreed to arranging with input from the Fish and Wildlife Service for the design and implementation of an ancillary scientific study during and after the survey and subsequent analysis. The study would be conducted by researchers from U.S. Geological Survey, Biological Resources Division, in cooperation with the California Department of Fish and Game and other research partners. To supplement data obtained by researchers from bottom-mounted passive acoustic recorders placed in and near kelp beds used by resident sea otters, PG&E would provide researchers with GPS reference time data for the air gun shots from the seismic survey vessel. These data would be used to validate the acoustic modeling to measure the propagation of sound through sea otter habitat and to estimate received sound levels that may be useful in determining sea otter behavioral response thresholds as a function of sound exposure. So again, that Federal Register notice is up for publication on Wednesday. Regarding the Section 7 consultation pursuant to the Federal Endangered Species Act, we are also engaged in consultation with the National Science Foundation. Our biological opinion is forthcoming. We also plan to issue a final biological opinion. We don't plan to go out for draft. There's no public comment period for the biological opinion. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.